You have come to a day that does not look loud, but it carries weight, because the hardest test often ends quietly, like a door that finally stops shaking in its frame. You may have thought this season would announce its own ending with thunder, but what if the real sign is the calm in your chest when you wake and realize the burden is no longer sitting on your ribs? You have walked through pressure that made ordinary things feel heavy, and even a chair, a cup of coffee, or the sound of your phone on the table could feel like part of a long vigil. This is not random pain, and it is not wasted time, because the soul is often formed where the body learns endurance. C.S. Lewis understood that suffering can become a severe mercy, and that phrase fits the moment when a test breaks you down only to rebuild what was true. You are not being punished by every delay, you are being prepared by it. The day can begin with tired eyes and a quiet room, yet still carry a turning point that changes the meaning of everything that came before. That is why you need to listen carefully, because the end of a difficult proving ground is often recognized first in the spirit before it is seen in the calendar. It may look like an ordinary morning, but something old is losing its grip on you. Something old is ending. You know the shape of a hard season because it changes the simplest places first, like the kitchen sink where you stood too long in silence, or the car seat where you stared ahead while your mind replayed the same concern. The same hallway, the same bed, the same walk to the front gate can feel different when your heart has been carrying a question for weeks. You have been moving through days with a kind of inward bracing, as if any small sound might become the next disappointment. And yet even there, in the middle of repetition, God has been working with a patience that does not need applause. Attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment. The test has not only touched your schedule, it has touched your identity. What used to feel like proof of weakness is being exposed as a place where endurance was quietly growing underneath. Your shoulders have known the strain, your jaw has held back words, and your hands have clenched around things you could not control. But the pressure did not define you. It revealed what could survive it. When a season is this long, the old self starts asking for shortcuts, for escape, for a cheaper story. But that story no longer fits what is being formed in you. You are closer than your fear admits. You are not in the beginning anymore. There is a kind of suffering that does not arrive all at once, because it enters through small refusals. A message left unanswered, a door not opened, a hope postponed, a prayer repeated with no visible change. You may have started by asking for relief, then for clarity, then for just enough strength to get through the next hour. That is how the long proving works. It trains you to stop performing and start enduring. The room around you can stay unchanged while your insides are being rearranged, and that is why this kind of trial feels so private. No one sees the late night turning over in bed. No one hears the sentence you mutter under your breath when you think the answer should have arrived by now. Yet what is hidden in that private place matters greatly. The biblical echo here is not distant, it is close to the life you are living. Like Joseph in a pit, David in the field, or Israel in the wilderness learning that delay can still be direction. The pattern is clear, even if the road is not. What looks like interruption may be formation. What looks like waiting may be instruction. The test is not asking whether you can be impressive. It is asking whether you can remain faithful when nothing around you is cheering. That question is uncomfortable. It is also holy. Some of what has hurt you most is the feeling that you should already be farther along by now, as if your timeline had become evidence against you. You watch others move, and the old comparison rises with polished shoes and a confident voice, pretending to know what your life should have looked like. Yet comparison is a poor judge of a hidden season, because it cannot see the weight you carried into the room. It cannot measure the nights you stayed awake, the tears you swallowed, or the prayers you repeated when hope felt thin. The same waiting that seemed to shame you is being revealed as the place where depth was built. You are not behind. You are being deepened. If the Lord had removed the pressure too early, you might have called it mercy and missed the preparation inside it. There was more happening than relief would have allowed you to notice. Even now, your body remembers the stress, but your spirit is learning a different language. The truth is that not every burden is a sign you are losing. Some burdens are the last push before the ground shifts. Hold that thought when discouragement tries to rename your season. The story is not finished just because the ache has been long. There are moments when the test becomes most visible in the body, because the body tells the truth before the mouth knows how to say it. Your breathing has felt shallow at times, as if you were waiting for the next blow. Your stomach tightened in places where peace should have lived, and sleep may have come with interruptions that left your mind raw by morning. Even the sound of a notification can become a small jolt when you have been living on edge for too long. This is how pressure leaves fingerprints. It shows up in the shoulders, the throat, the eyes, the way you keep looking over the same question from different angles. But the body's alarm is not the final word. Sometimes it is only the place where the soul is asking to be recentered. The test has made you aware of every gap, every weakness, every unfinished thing. Yet that awareness can become wisdom if you let it. Old habits of control try to seize the wheel when you feel uncertain, but control is only a mask for fear. What is being invited now is steadiness. The relief that comes from surrender is not passive. It is strong enough to stop fighting shadows. A hard season teaches you to listen differently. It teaches you that peace is not the absence of battle, but the presence of God in the middle of it. You have probably noticed how a serious trial changes the way you measure time. A week feels like a month, and a single unanswered concern can sit on the heart like a stone in a pocket. You begin to notice how often you check the same thing, how often you replay the same possibility, how often you imagine an outcome just to keep yourself from feeling helpless. That is not weakness in the shallow sense. It is the strain of a soul that wants certainty before trust. But trust does not ask you to see the whole road. It asks you to take the next step honestly. There is a difference between being abandoned and being trained to depend on what cannot be shaken. The old interpretation says delay means refusal. The new one says delay may be refinement. You may not like that answer, but it is often the one that explains why the fire did not consume you. The thing that has cost you so much is also teaching you what cannot be bought with comfort. You are learning what remains when appearances are stripped away. That is not a small lesson. It is the kind that changes how you walk into the next chapter. The hardest part of a long trial is not always the pain itself, but the silence that sits beside it. Silence can feel like distance when your heart is already tired, and it can tempt you to read absence where there is actually hidden care. You may have heard the old voice that says, If this were really for good, it would feel easier by now. That voice sounds reasonable, but it is not faithful. A seed does not complain in the dark soil because it understands that growth is happening where no one can applaud it. In the same way, your life has been undercovering, not abandonment. The work has been underground, and underground work always feels slow. You have been asking for proof, but proof is not always what the soul needs first. Sometimes the soul needs interpretation, and interpretation arrives when you see the same pain through a different lens. The test that once looked like a verdict may now be shown as a corridor. What seemed like delay may have been a mercy that kept you from stepping into something unready. That does not erase the ache, but it changes its meaning. Meaning is where endurance finds its breath. Meaning is what keeps you from calling the entire season failure. You may have wondered whether your tears disqualified you from being strong, but tears are often the body's way of telling the truth when language runs out. They come in the dark, in the shower, in the car, in the kitchen, while the kettle is warming and nobody is looking. There is no shame in that. There is only evidence that this trial has touched something real, and because it is real, it can be healed in a way that shallow things never can. The pressure has tried to teach you that vulnerability is danger, yet vulnerability is often where surrender begins. You do not need to pretend that the weight has been light. You only need to stop agreeing with the lie that the weight was pointless. Some of your strongest moments have looked like ordinary survival, and heaven has counted them. That is part of the mystery C.S. Lewis knew when he wrote that a severe mercy can wound in order to save. The wound is not the final sentence. The saving is. So when your mind returns to the old script of defeat, answer it with the quieter truth that your endurance has already become testimony. The season is teaching you to stand in a different way now, not harder, truer. The thing about difficult seasons is that they often reveal the people and patterns that cannot carry you where you are going. Some voices drain you by naming your fears as facts. Some habits keep you circling the same pain because the familiar feels safer than the unknown. Some forms of busyness keep you too distracted to notice that your soul is starving for honesty. The test can expose all of that at once. It can show you where you have been overextended, where you have been performing strength, where you have been surviving on borrowed clarity. This exposure is not cruelty. It is mercy in hard clothing. What is not meant for you starts to feel heavier than before. What is true begins to feel simpler, even if it costs more. You may have lost patience for shallow answers, and that is a gift, not a failure. Depth is being demanded of you now. Your next steps will not be powered by panic the way your last steps may have been. They will be guided by what remains when fear stops talking so loudly. That is why the end of a test can feel like both relief and grief. Something in you is leaving the old room even while another part is still looking back. There is a strange courage that grows when you stop asking every painful event to explain itself immediately. You begin to let the meaning unfold, like light moving across a floor in the morning. The same facts remain, but their weight changes. The door that would not open starts to look less like rejection and more like redirection. The answer that delayed starts to look less like neglect and more like timing that protected you. This is not sentimental thinking. It is disciplined seeing. It is the refusal to let fear have the final interpretation. Your body may still remember strain, but your inner life can learn new language right where the strain used to dominate. There is also a cost to this shift, because once you see that not every closed door is an insult, you can no longer live by impulse alone. You must become more attentive, more patient, more honest. That honesty will spare you from chasing what cannot hold you. It will also keep you from missing the quiet gifts that only appear when you slow down enough to notice. The trial has not only been testing your patience, it has been teaching your sight. And sight is changing the way you walk. If any of this landed in you, write Isu in the comments and come back to me. Say it not because the struggle is theatrical, but because recognition matters when a season has been trying to isolate your heart. The simple act of naming what you see can become a way of saying you are no longer confused by the mask this trial wore. Maybe the pain looked like failure, but now you are beginning to see the pattern underneath it. Maybe the waiting looked like emptiness, but now it is showing its hidden work. That is the turning point. Not that everything became easy, but that truth became clearer than dread. When you write that phrase, you are marking the moment when interpretation starts to shift. And then you come back, not to the fear, but to the voice that has been tracing this road with you. The next part matters because the story is moving from endurance into recognition. You are not just surviving the test anymore, you are reading it differently. When a season keeps you waiting long enough, you start to notice how often your mind tries to build a future out of scarcity. You imagine the worst, rehearse the unlikely, and call it preparation, but it is really anxiety dressed as foresight. The test has been dismantling that habit, piece by piece. Not all at once, and not gently, but thoroughly enough to make room for a calmer trust. You may still feel the old reflex in your chest when uncertainty appears, yet even that reflex is becoming a cue to turn inward rather than outward. The room, the desk, the parked car, the line at the store, all of it can become a place where you silently decide whether fear will interpret your life again. It does not have to. The hidden lesson of this difficult day is that you are allowed to stop treating every delay as disaster. You can let the pause be a pause. You can let silence be silence. You can let God be God without demanding immediate proof. That is not resignation. That is strength with its hand open. And strength with an open hand is very different from the old clenched survival you have known. Open-handed living begins to make room for peace. You have also felt the strain of trying to explain your season to people who only want a shorter story. They hear a piece and think they understand the whole, but they did not live inside your waiting. They did not carry the private weight, the careful prayers, the day-by-day discipline of not letting bitterness settle in. So much of this road has been invisible. That invisibility has made you feel unseen at times, but being unseen by people is not the same as being unseen by God. In fact, the hidden place is often where the deepest work happens. The lesson is severe, yes, but it is also tender in its purpose. It is stripping away the need to perform for an audience that was never qualified to interpret your life. What remains when applause is removed is character. What remains when easy answers fail is trust. What remains when your explanation runs out is the quiet knowledge that your life is still held. The old you wanted a faster resolution. The new you is learning to value what was forged in the delay. This is where strength stops being a pose and becomes a settled way of standing. There are lines from Scripture that come alive differently when you are the one in the middle of the story. When the psalmist speaks of walking through the valley, or when the apostle speaks of endurance producing character, those words stop sounding like distant poetry and start sounding like your own breath. You know what it means to keep moving while the road still feels dim. You know what it means to believe without applause. You know what it means to continue even when your emotions lag behind your faith. That is why this moment is not just about relief. It is about recognition. You are beginning to see that the trial was never merely an interruption. It was a school. It taught you what comfort never could. It taught you what survives when external support is thin. It taught you that the soul can be strengthened in ways the body notices only later. And because that is true, the ending of the test does not mean your learning is over. It means the hardest lesson has been absorbed enough to change your next choice. One season ends and another kind of life starts to take shape. You are not emerging empty. You are emerging informed. Hold still with this, because the meaning is moving deeper now, like water finding a lower place in the ground. The same event that once made you ask why is becoming the place where you ask what was being built. That shift matters. It saves you from turning pain into identity. It keeps you from carrying a scar as though it were a name. The truth is that some of the things you thought were breaking you were actually breaking the power of what had controlled you for years. Old patterns of fear, over-control, self-protection, and silent desperation do not like being exposed. They resist release. But release is exactly what this season has been pressing toward. If you have been losing interest in shallow pleasures, if you have been less able to tolerate false peace, if you have felt a strange hunger for honesty, that is not emptiness. That is the beginning of freedom. The test was fierce because the transformation mattered. When the final pressure lifts, you will notice that certain habits no longer fit the person you are becoming. That is how grace often works. It does not flatter the old shape. It makes room for the true one. You may have thought the hardest proof of faith would be staying joyful, but sometimes the hardest proof is staying truthful. To tell the truth about the pain without surrendering to it is a kind of mature courage. To admit that you were tired, disappointed, afraid, and still here is not weakness, it is witness. This witness is important because it breaks the private agreement you made with despair that nobody would understand. Someone does understand. God has seen the details you kept hidden from others, and He has not treated your tears as evidence against you. He has treated them as part of the process. The room where you cried, the chair where you sat in silence, the bed where you stared at the ceiling, the road where you drove in thoughtless circles. None of it was wasted. The old story says, suffering only subtracts. The truer story says, suffering can refine. That is hard to accept when you are in it, because refinement feels like loss before it feels like gain. Yet the loss is often of what could not follow you into maturity. The gain is a clearer heart. A clearer heart sees more accurately. A clearer heart is harder to deceive. And a clearer heart is what this season has been after all along. Now imagine the season like a stone placed in your hand and then slowly taken away, leaving behind the memory of its weight. That weight taught you something about endurance, about dependence, about what you reach for when you are tired. You may still feel the impression of it in your palm, as if the shape of the trial has been burned into your memory. But impressions are not possessions. They remind you of what you carried. They do not define what you must carry forever. This is why the ending of the difficult proof is not merely escape. It is instruction, complete enough to be released. You were not meant to live under the same pressure indefinitely. You were meant to learn from it and then move. The next movement is quieter than the struggle, but it is no less sacred. It asks you to stop waiting for the old burden to return before you believe the lesson was real. The lesson is real because you are still here. The lesson is real because you are more honest than before. The lesson is real because the old fear no longer sounds as convincing. That is how the burden loosens, not by forgetting it, but by refusing to let it keep naming you. The metaphor has been building like a road of stones across water, and now you can see how each stone carried you one step farther than you thought you could go. You crossed because the path was laid beneath your fear, not because your fear disappeared. You crossed because the next stone appeared when the previous one was enough. That is how many of your days have worked, though you did not always notice it at the time. You kept arriving at enough strength for one more honest hour, one more conversation, one more meal, one more night. The journey has not been glamorous, but it has been faithful. It has also been teaching you that not every step has to feel dramatic to be decisive. Quiet obedience is still obedience. Quiet endurance is still endurance. Quiet trust is still trust. The old mind wants fireworks so it can believe transformation is real. The wiser heart learns to recognize it in small movements, a softer reaction, a calmer breath, a refusal to panic, a willingness to wait without collapsing. These small movements are not small to heaven. They are the stones that carry you across. And the crossing is speaking now. You know the image by now. The road beneath you, the water below, the hand that steadies you even when you feel unsteady. Stay with that road a little longer, because it is showing you that the hardest proof in your life is not trying to drown you. It is carrying you across what would have stopped you before. The pressure, the delay, the silence, the repeated question, all of it has been part of the crossing. You did not invent this path, and you did not have to make it perfect. You only had to keep stepping onto what was already placed before you. That is why your exhaustion matters, and why your perseverance matters, and why the moments you thought were wasted are now gathering meaning. The stones do not ask for perfection from the traveler. They ask for presence. Presence is what keeps you from running back to the shore of old fears. Presence is what allows the next step to be enough. When you look back, you will see that the route was narrower than you wanted and safer than you understood. That is often how mercy behaves. It does not always feel soft. It often feels precise, and precision can save a life that comfort could not. A voice in you may still protest that this road took too long, that the test was more severe than you wanted, that the burden should have ended sooner. That protest is human, and it does not make you faithless. But do not let it become the only voice you hear. There is another voice, quieter and sturdier, saying that the road was long because what it was carrying into you mattered. Some lessons cannot be rushed without being lost. Some strength cannot be inherited second-hand. Some tenderness can only be learned where you have been honest about your pain. The road also taught you what kind of company cannot walk with you forever. You may have noticed that certain distractions lost their shine, certain drama lost its appeal, certain voices stopped feeling like guidance and started sounding like noise. That clarity is a gift. It protects the next stretch. What you are becoming cannot be governed by old confusion. The path is narrowing into purpose. The crossing is taking you somewhere, not just away from something. That means the end of the test is not emptiness. It is direction. It is the first clear glimpse of where your feet are meant to go now. Write esto pronto in the comments, and then come back to me. Say it as a declaration that the road has not broken you, only prepared you for what comes next. There is something powerful in naming readiness when you have spent so long surviving uncertainty. The crossing has not ended because life has become easy. It has ended because you are no longer the same traveler. You can say those words with humility, not arrogance, because readiness is often shaped in places that nobody else sees. It is shaped in the long nights, the quiet restraint, the disciplined refusal to quit. When you write it, you mark the moment that the road has changed you. Then return here with that settled heart, because the movement is not over. The road is still speaking. The difference is that now you can hear it without panic. The next lesson on this road is that readiness does not always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like a stable breath, while everything around you stays ordinary. Sometimes it feels like answering one message without dread, or waking without the same crushing weight on your chest, or choosing not to replay the same hurt for the 100th time. These are not small things. They are signs that the old proving ground has loosened its grip. They are signs that your nervous habit of bracing is being interrupted by a deeper steadiness. The road is no longer only about surviving the impact. It is about learning how to walk without expecting impact every moment. That shift matters because fear trains you to stay crouched, but faith trains you to stand. Standing, attention, you need to prepare now. I put together an exclusive resource for those who feel set apart for something greater, but live surrounded by noise, distractions, and mental overload. This is a 30-day journey that will transform your life. A guided path to armor your mind and prepare for what's coming with daily practices of focus, boundaries, and discipline. Stop negotiating with the noise. Learn to spot distractions before they control you, and strengthen your mind. Also available in an immersive audio version. Over 10 Zuru readers have already transformed their lives through the 30-day journey. Thousands of people have already started this transformation. People like you who are tired of living in the fog. Ordinary people who decided to stop accepting mental chaos. Take advantage of this limited time offer only this month. Access your link just below in the pinned comment.